few weeks ago, from when I'm recording this video, a movie called Undertone came out. I didn't see it because it didn't seem like the type of horror movie that appeals to me, but it cost almost nothing to make, and it made a little bit of a profit, and some people saw it. What was interesting about this movie is that it has to do something with like a haunted podcast or a podcast that deals with supernatural stuff, what have you. And so one of the pull quotes that they had to advertise it was the scariest film you'll ever hear, which is sort of a play on the pull quote you'll see from many other movies that are like the scariest film you've ever seen or something. Longlegs had a quote that was similar to this when that came out a couple of years ago. And what happens with some of these movies is that horror audiences can usually be divided into a couple different groups. There's like the hardcore horror movie fans who see like every major release, as well as like some of the minor stuff that goes on Tubi. You have the mainstream horror fans. They'll go see like the big horror releases, ones that come out from studios, or the A24 and Neon stuff that has a bit more of a marketing push. And then you have the casual horror fans. These are the people who don't make it their deal to go see every single horror release, but if something picks up a little bit of buzz or whatever, they might go see it. And sometimes if something is advertised as the scariest or whatever, some of these casuals will go to see it. And then they usually will not like it because that pull quote that's about the scariest whatever ends up overselling what they're getting. You can see this in the CinemaScore ratings that come out for some of these movies. CinemaScore is this company. They do exit polling of audiences who go to see a movie on opening night, so usually like the opening Thursday or maybe the Friday. And it's a letter scale of like A+ to F, and they ask audiences what they thought. And most audiences will rate movies in the A's or the B's. They're pretty forgiving. They're, you took the time to go out to a movie and to pay for your ticket and whatever, so that happens. And CinemaScore is mainly a good rating as far as did the audience that was most excited to see the movie, so this is the people who ran out to see it opening night, did the movie deliver what the marketing said it was going to deliver? So the marketing worked because it got them in the theater on opening night, and then did they get the experience they were hoping to see? So you'll see that, the most common movie to get an A+ are like the Jesus-freak Christian movies, because, that audience doesn't really care about the quality of a movie. They only care that their beliefs are parroted back at them in a way that they enjoy. But you'll see that a lot of good horror movies, or even great horror movies, end up having sort of a low grade. Hereditary famously had a pretty bad CinemaScore rating. And that seems to be because that opening night crowd gets a lot of those casuals who come in expecting something like, I don't know, The Conjuring or whatever, and what they get is not quite what they have. And this whole thing came to mind because I don't know what people mean when they ask if a movie is scary. And this is something that comes up a lot with me, because when you're like the movie guy, or especially the horror movie guy, as I am to a lot of the other people in my life, sometimes people who don't know a lot about horror movies, or they're just those casuals, they'll come to me and they'll ask for some suggestions to watch for horror movies, usually during like the Halloween season, when even people who aren't into horror still want to watch some horror or whatever. And so, I'll ask them about some movies that they like, and, jumping off of that, I'll try to think of some movies that are along those lines so that I know that it caters to their taste, because my taste in the movies that I really like aren't necessarily going to be the ones that appeal to those people. And almost to a T, there is the immediate follow-up question to any movie I give them, which is it scary? Or how scary is it? And I never know how to answer this question, because no movie is scary, right? I don't get what that question means. Like, scary movie is like a term for horror movies, hence the Scary Movie parody movies, and Scary Movie was the original title of Scream. But I don't understand what that means. I don't think I've been scared by a movie since I was a child. Now, perhaps this is an autistic thing for me, or maybe it's just a baseline of what the definition of scary is, and that's what I kind of want to explore here, is like, what do people mean when they ask, is a movie scary? But my definition of scared is like fearful for your life or your body intact kind of thing. So in that scale, no, I can't. As an adult, I'm not watching a movie and I'm afraid I'm going to die because of something that happens in the movie or something. Like, what? Like, I've never been scared by a movie in my adult life. I'm more scared in the car ride driving to the movie because I am scared of driving. I don't like doing it. And that is an activity that people often get hurt or died in. So I'm not scared when I go see a horror movie. I'm scared on the drive to the horror movie, maybe. So I don't know what that means. And I kind of wanted to pontificate, I guess, or to kind of talk through what people might be meaning and why I don't think that fits the definition of the word scary. So I've decided to break this up into a couple different subcategories as far as what I think people mean when they ask me this. And then the discussion can be open in the comments below as far as if this is a question you ask or if you find a movie scary, what do you mean by that? Because that would actually be helpful when people come in October and ask me for horror movie suggestions. The easiest thing, since we're talking about casuals, the easiest category would be jump scares or startling, because that is something that a lot of casuals like, that a lot of full-on horror movie fans tend to not like. See, to me, so many years ago now at this point, South Park did an episode about jump scares, and they made a pretty convincing argument, I think, that that is not being scared, that is being startled, by which I mean that is a physiological effect that is happening to you, but it doesn't scare you. Like, it doesn't activate, like, the cognitive fear in your brain because it's something that happens that bypasses thought. It's like if you have headphones on while you're washing dishes or something, and someone like taps you on the shoulder unexpectedly and you jump. Like, you're not really like scared because your brain isn't doing anything to be like scared, to be aware that you should be fearful. It's just you're surprised, you're startled. And that's kind of what a jump scare is in a movie. You know, there is that sort of famous apocryphal quote that is like, the pun is the lowest form of humor. And whether you agree with that or not, my corollary to that would be that the jump scare is the lowest form of horror movie. Like, I have no respect for jump scares. There are maybe a single-digit number of jump scares in horror movies that are actually done with any sort of skill or effort. The famous one in Exorcist 3 is generally considered one of the best. But a lot of them are just shitty. They follow the trope of, oh, it's just a cat, or someone is looking in the bathroom cabinet mirror and there's nothing there, and then they open it and it's something there, or vice versa. Or, you know, a scene is just dead silent, and so you don't know what's happening, and then the camera's obscuring something, and then it pans to something, or something gets revealed, and then there's a big on the soundtrack, and then you're, I don't get why people like that. Like, there is a medium for jump scares where it works, and that is the haunted house or a haunt in real life. Like, if I go to HHN, I'm expecting someone to jump out at me. I go, whatever, if it gets me, and then I just enjoy like the makeup and the costuming and the set design. But for a movie, that feels cheap, and you know, it seems like any hack in the editing room or behind the camera can make one of those. That doesn't scare you. That's just a cheap physiological effect on the audience to make them think that your movie is doing something other than one of the easiest things in a movie to do. So these aren't the type of movies that I recommend to people unless they specifically ask me what's a movie with a lot of jump scares, in which case I'll have to pick my brain for something that isn't a complete piece of shit. Also, it does also kind of go hand in hand that the type of horror movies that rely the most on jump scares tend to be my least favorite, like haunted house or ghost ones. I've never understood why ghosts as a concept are scary. Like, and I say this as a huge fan of Ghostbusters, but those are comedies. Because if a lot of horror movies are about fear of pain or fear of death, the existence of a ghost means that death is not the end and there is an afterlife, thereby making the fear of death less scary. So the entire concept of ghosts undercuts the concept of fear, or that you should be scared, because what if a ghost kills me? Don't I then become a ghost and we're on the same playing field with the same amount of power? What's scary about that? Which is why I liked in one of my favorite movies of last year, Presence, where the ghost isn't the threat. The threat is a human being in that movie. Slight spoiler if you haven't seen Presence. So some of that also kind of goes in with personal taste, but otherwise, I don't even think that's being scared. That is being startled. Another reason a lot of casuals like jump scares, there was a study that was done, and I wish I could find it again, but it was in the early 2000s. And this was during the time when, slightly before the torture horror came about with like Saw and Hostel, there were a string of these PG-13 horror movies that were remakes of Asian horror movies, mostly Japanese, but some South Korean, some Thailand, stuff like that. So Ring, Grudge, things like that. And they were finding that those movies were more popular with teenage girls than they were with what they expected the horror audience to be, which was adult men. And the reason for that was apparently the teenage girls liked going on dates with those because the jump scare would give them an excuse to latch onto their date, and so like to hold their like guy or whatever tight, and therefore it was a socially acceptable way to bypass them initiating physical contact or having physical contact in public. And I'm not sure what the science behind that or what the data was behind that, but it seemed to at least make sense just on the surface level of the byline there. And so I wonder if the people who are looking for jump scares aren't really looking to be scared, but they're looking for that. They're looking for like the roller coaster effect of it, that it allows them to like grab their partner or whatever, and to sort of have that, or because the jump scare isn't scary. It's just like you jump because you're unexpected, and then you giggle because, oh, I was a fool for laughing at that. You're looking for something different than being scared. But that is a reason why I don't think jump scares count as scary. Another thing I hear is the movie nightmare-inducing. This is another category now. So the idea is this a movie that I'll go to see or I'll watch on my TV, and then once the movie's over, I'll be scared of like the dark in my own home, or will it give me nightmares when I go to sleep? That seems to be a very interpersonal thing to a person. I can't tell you a movie's going to give you a nightmare or it's going to make you scared of the dark or something, because I'm not scared of the dark, and two, anytime I have a nightmare or a dream that I would consider unpleasant, they're not about like that I'm going to be hurt or murdered. They're usually about frustration, like I really need to get something at a store and I can't find it. Like my bad dreams aren't about scary shit or horror things. They're about frustration or obstacles to a goal. That seems to be, I don't know what that says about me and my psychology, but those are what my bad dreams are about. So I don't know what this means, because that question implies, or it stands to reason that you're not scared while you're watching the movie. You were scared after the movie's over, or maybe even hours after the fact. And I don't know how to process that question. Like why would that, like, so you, like, I guess you watch a movie and then you go home and it makes you think about something from the movie, so you're afraid the thing in the movie is going to happen to you. I don't really know why. Like, if I feel like a true crime documentary or the news would have more of that effect than a horror movie. Like, there are many different levels of realism in horror movies. Some have, supernatural slashers like Jason or Freddy, and some have, home invasion or are more grounded. But I've never made the connection that, because I went to see this movie, like 3 hours from now when I'm home, the same thing's going to happen, or there's going to be a copycat. So I don't really know how to judge that. Like, that really says more about you. Like, if you're someone who's prone to having nightmares, and the things that give you nightmares, then if you give me that list, then maybe I could tell you. But I wouldn't necessarily say like a movie is scary because you will get nightmares later. I don't think that's something that says more about the viewer than it does about the movie itself. So I can't really recommend a movie based on that. I can only really do that from your personal stuff. Okay, so this next category is going to be a little amorphous, but you could say it's like splatter movies, gory movies, gross out movies. So there's different categories to this, obviously, because like the Friday the 13th movies have, plenty of gore. The Final Destination movies have gore, but the tone of those movies is not as serious. So people who are casual fans or whatever can usually enjoy those more than something that has a more serious tone but is equally or more gory than those. So when I talk about like splatter or gross out movies, then I'm talking about more extreme stuff. So August Underground, American Guinea Pig, stuff like that. Stuff that really like revels in harder core gore than you'd see in a mainstream movie. But when people ask, is a movie scary, I don't think they're asking about gore or gross out or things that would like be repellent, I guess. Mainly because a lot of people don't, even the people who like those movies don't necessarily find them scary. They find them disgusting or disquieting. And usually if a person wants a movie like that, they specifically ask for that in other verbiage. Like if somebody wants a movie like that, they'll ask me like, David, what's a really gory movie, or what's a really gross movie, or what's a really fucked up movie? Fucked up can mean some other things we'll talk about later too. And so I'll know like what kind of thing they're looking for. They're looking for something that would be put out by like Unearthed Films on Blu-ray or something. They're not looking for your average slasher movie that came out from Blumhouse or something. So I don't think that is scary, because even the people who don't like those movies or can't watch those movies usually wouldn't describe those movies as scary. They would describe those as gross or repellent or some other sort of negative adjective of that sort. And also, the people who are asking me for recommendations usually don't want to see a movie like that, because the people who like movies like that already know what those movies are, or even if they haven't seen them, they've already heard about them. They know that it exists. The people who are into that are not like the casuals who are asking for recommendations. Those are the people who are looking through film forums and scrounging letterbox lists for those kind of movies because they know they're into that. So unless somebody is like usually not into those and they want to like dip their toe into it, then they might ask for a recommendation. But people who ask, is a movie scary, they're not usually talking about those movies. Even if they like them, they're not talking about those movies. So I don't think like the August Undergrounds and stuff like that. I don't, or even something that's like not as gross like that, like a Wolf Creek or something. They're not going for that kind of thing, or The Hills Run Red. Those people aren't looking for that kind of thing. They're not looking to be scared. So I don't think that's what they're asking for either. Adjacent to that, but not part of the same, is like the torture horror stuff. Some people have called it torture porn, and that's sort of the label that's come to them. I think that label is inaccurate and disrespectful to the better movies of that subgenre. Because the idea behind that is that genre became popular in the 2000s when the United States was actually torturing people in real life, so it was reflecting the political zeitgeist of the time, whether those filmmakers were trying to do that or not. But the basic concept behind torture horror is that the fear of prolonged pain is worse than the fear of death. So in a sense, like if you're not scared to die, but you're scared of feeling pain, then that might appeal to you. But the torture horror stuff, kind of along with the extreme horror or the splatter horror stuff, again, people don't usually say that's scary, or they're not asking for that. Or the people who are asking if a movie's going to scare you, they're not looking for the torture specific though. They're not looking to see Touristas or Hostel or Saw or something like that. Especially not Saw, which is a little bit more of a soap opera. People who have not seen those movies don't believe me when I say that. It's kind of a ridiculous soap opera, and I love them. But that's not what they're asking for either. So when people ask, is this movie scary, or I want a movie that's going to scare me, they're not looking for that. Especially because you don't have to be a horror movie to have torture in it. Especially, I mean, there are plenty of movies about the Bush administration, like Rendition and stuff, that have torture, or Rosewater or something. Things that are like political movies, not even thrillers, just dramas that have it. And you're not really going to call them scary, right? So so that definitely is not what they're asking either. The people who want to see those movies, and equally. Okay, so here's a category that's a little more amorphous. So when I first started dating my partner, she would do this. She would ask me like, would I like this movie, or have you seen this horror movie before? I'm interested in seeing it. And I would say like I liked it, I didn't like it. I'd give like a basic rundown. And she would ask that follow-up question, like, is it scary? And I like I'm saying in this entire video, I don't know how to answer that. So she shifted the question to something that's a little bit easier for me to grasp onto, which is it intense? And the word intensity in this description is a little easier for me to grapple onto, but I still have difficulty with it as her go-to follow-up question about horror movies. So, and the thing is, because a movie doesn't have to be a horror movie to be intense. Like, I would consider Uncut Gems intense, but that's not a horror movie. That's not even really a thriller. That's a drama that just has a lot of suspense. And if you're equating intensity with suspense, that also includes other movies that no one would really consider scary, like some of Alfred Hitchcock's spy thrillers and stuff. Like, I'm not sure who's scared of Strangers on a Train or The Lady Vanishing, but you could call those suspenseful. Maybe not so much intense because they're a little older. Or Brian De Palma's Blowout or Body Double. Those could be considered intense, but I don't think anyone's scared by them. So it's a little bit easier. Now, just to use an anecdote from our lives, she was interested in watching the movie Green Room, which was my favorite movie of the year that came out. That's the one, more of a thriller than a horror movie, but some people place it into horror, which is fine. But it's the one about the punk band. They're stuck on the neo-Nazi compound, and they have to like figure out how to get out, whether it's fight, negotiate, whatever. And I thought she'd be okay with it because she likes The Devil's Rejects and the Rob Zombie movies, and those are movies that are firmly in horror and firmly have torture sequences. Like, if you've seen The Devil's Rejects, there's a scene where the family is tied to chairs and they're getting nails in their hands. That's torture. And there's the whole motel sequence, which is usually the seviest scene in that movie, and that's got some psychological torture, that's got threats of sexual violence. That's pretty intense. I would call that intense. But she's totally okay with those. But then we're watching Green Room, and there's that scene where Imogen Poots takes the box cutter and she slices the stomach and the chest of the neo-Nazi. And that was too much. She couldn't finish watching the movie anymore. So that's a little bit of a mix though, because there's the situation, which is intense. There's also the real world corollary of we live amongst so many neo-Nazis these days in 2026. And there's a little bit like of violence in there as well. I wouldn't consider that torture. That's more of that was kind of a spur of the moment murder in that scene. A little self-defense-y, but still murder. So, I wouldn't call that movie scary. But the word intense, I could put intense onto Green Room, but I also wouldn't call Green Room a horror movie. So that also adds to that. But there are other movies that are like maybe thrillers and stuff that are on the razor's edge of being horror, and some people would consider them horror. But I'm not sure you'd apply the word scary to them. Silence of the Lambs, famously, Best Picture winner. I would call that a thriller. Other people would call it a horror movie. I can respect calling it a horror movie, even though I think it's not quite there, but there's plenty of textual evidence that you could call that a horror movie. Same with Manhunter and the other Hannibal Lecter stuff. Maybe not Young Hannibal, but that's more of a revenge movie. But at least intensity, I can at least grapple. Like my brain can handle, or can get some hands around what a movie being intense means. Like, I can get that. but then it just kind of becomes a difference of opinion at that point. Like, because for instance, I thought Green Room would be okay to show her because one, it's not a horror movie. It's more of a thriller and everything, and I didn't think anything that happened into it counts as torture, but there's still like violence, but it was a little too much for her. As opposed to The Devil's Rejects, which she loves. So sometimes definitional stuff is a little weird, but but I wouldn't call intensity scary either. Intense is more like a disquieting, unpleasant feeling. Now, it could be an unpleasant feeling that you want to have. Sometimes I enjoy an intense, stressful movie. Outside of Uncut Gems, talking about another recent non-horror movie, there was If I Had Legs, I Kick You. That movie is a pretty intense, unpleasant experience to watch. I'm glad I saw it. It's a very good movie. I have no desire to ever watch it again. But also, yeah, not a horror movie, unless maybe it's a horror movie if you're a parent. But otherwise, not a horror movie, but still something I'd call intense or, oppressive. It's oppressive feeling. But I don't necessarily think that's what people ask when they ask if a movie's scary. I don't think they're asking that, because not many horror movies fit into that category unless they're also thrillers or something. So I don't know, but at least that's a little bit easier for me to grapple. Like I can sort of. So you might be asking, hey Dave, what are your favorite types of horror movies? The ones that really stick to you? Well, there's a couple different categories of those. Like, I usually say that my favorite classic horror movie is the original Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero movie. And I don't really know what category to put that in. I don't think anybody would find that movie scary. It's a little fun, but the tone isn't light. It's not a horror comedy, even though there's comedy in it. There's like a pie fighting sequence in there. So I don't really know what subcategory you'd put that in besides, zombie movie, social commentary, that kind of thing. But then the movie is like about 20 plus years old now at this point, so I can't really call it my favorite newer horror movie anymore when there are adults who aren't as old as it. But the French horror film Martyrs from the 2000s, I used to say that was my favorite modern horror movie. And that I would put into the category of disturbing or fucked up, but not because of gore. I mean, the movie does have violence and gore and blood and stuff, but that's not the part that's disturbing about it. The part that's disturbing about it is the concept and a little bit of the existential dread that goes with it. Like it's disturbing due to concept and execution of that concept. And I think that's kind of like the sweet spot for me as far as like quote unquote recent horror movies was sort of set by like those French extremity movies. So like that and High Tension and Inside and stuff like that. Like they had violence and gore that was a little bit above what American films were doing at the time outside of the torture genre. But they also just had like disturbing ideas behind them. Like the concept is like, whoa, that's fucked up. That's messed up. That tends to be my favorite, but I also wouldn't call that scary. Like I'm not feeling fear when I watch Martyrs. I'm feeling, well, I'm like, well, that's fucked up, man. That's fucked up that people would do that or could act like that or something. And even though the concept behind that has some supernatural elements, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of it is still pretty grounded. And the disturbing thing isn't really the supernatural stuff or the fantasy stuff about it. It's the human behavior that goes along and fuels that story. Same thing with High Tension. There's some elevated aspects of that in terms of unrealism, but that's still about humans doing horrible things. So that's my favorite sort of like amorphous category, but I don't think that's what people mean when they mean scary. There's also different levels of disturbing. Like I mentioned the Saw films earlier. So the original Saw, I found part of that disturbing. Now, if you haven't seen the original Saw or you haven't seen it in some time, especially the R-rated cut, the movie's not that gory at all. A lot of the violence is off-screen or off-frame in camera. And it's more about the concept of who's being targeted and the motive behind that and stuff. But the part that disturbed me about that first movie was the very end where Adam gets locked in the bathroom. Spoiler for the original Saw, if you haven't seen it. Adam gets locked in the bathroom and he's screaming. And the closing credits begin and you still hear him screaming. The part I found disturbing about that is the idea that the movie's over for us, the audience. The lights come up, we can get up and throw our trash and walk out. But Adam is still in that bathroom, and it's like the movie's telling you by having the screams over the closing credits that the movie's not over for him. He's still stuck in there in the dark alone. That's the part that's disturbing, that like the safety of the movie being over doesn't mean safety. So that's what I found disturbing about that. But I wouldn't call the movie scary either. I don't think the original Saw or any of the Saw movies are scary. So that's what I mean. And obviously we didn't find out what happened to Adam truly until a little bit in part 2 and mostly in part 3 with a flashback. So disturbing can mean a few different things. Like, I wouldn't say that that ending of Saw is nearly as disturbing as the entirety of the movie Martyrs, but there's that, yeah. And there's other movies that could be disturbing because of that, like a lot of movies in the rape revenge subgenre, because sexual assault is horrible. So there's that. But again, if somebody wants a movie, like say in that specific subgenre, they'll ask for it. They're not, they don't want like I want to see a scary movie. Okay, I spit on your grave. No, one thing, I wouldn't call the movie scary, and two, that's not a movie you give to somebody without like heavy warning ahead of time. Like I would say like also on the disturbing end could be Cannibal Holocaust, but even if you're watching the animal cruelty free version that Grindhouse put on their disc, which is the version I usually watch, that's still a disturbing movie. But is it scary? Not really. I mean, unless you have a trip to the Amazon the very next day, I'm not sure anybody would call that scary. So again, I'm at a loss as to what scary means. So my brain is like, does scary mean jump scare? Does scary mean gross? Does scary mean intense? Does scary mean fucked up and disturbing? What does scary mean? I don't know. And I think, I'm not even sure the people who want a scary movie even know. And that's why if there's a pull quote that says Longlegs is the scariest movie in years, and people go to it and they see Longlegs, which I think is a great movie, but I wouldn't call it scary, and then they're like, well, that wasn't scary. Well, of course it's not, because no movie's fucking scary. If you're going to a horror movie to be scared, you're never going to, because you're not a fucking child. So don't look for that. That's not why we go to horror movies. Now, we all go to horror movies for different things. Some people go for gore, some people go for imagination. I tend to go for themes and messaging these days, sometimes going to be disturbed if I hear good things about it. But we all go to horror movies if you like them for different reasons. I just think that no horror movie is scary, and that I don't know what scary means. And when people ask if a movie's scary, I don't even know if they know what they're asking for. And so I'm basically spending this entire video pontificating about this to kind of ask you, what do you mean? If you ask somebody, is this movie scary, what are you asking? Are you asking, is it going to make you jump? Are you asking, is it going to give you nightmares? Are you asking, is it gross and you're going to close your eyes because of the gore? Are you asking if it's just like about the fucked up dredges of humanity and it makes you feel existential dread at how dark the human condition can be? What do you mean? Tell me so that this question doesn't frustrate me when I keep hearing it. Anyway, this was the video that you voted for in my latest poll that you wanted of the 3 ideas that I had. I'll probably still make the other 2 videos, but this is the one you wanted most, so this is the one I put priority behind filming. Also, I just thought it might be fun to see if anybody watches this and comments and gives me a direct answer about what they mean, and then that will help around Halloween when people start asking me this question again. But anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you have a good one. And I hope you watch a good horror movie soon.